We, as in the B15 team, we run the model making workshop at Manchester School of Architecture, where many of you are students, which is great. For those of you who aren't, that's where we're based. Firstly, just to sort of say thanks to everybody for coming, and also the people that have really allowed this to happen, and in the earliest kind of incarnation of it, I have to thank Alan Lewis, who's here, because he's provided the support for this project earlier on, financial support, which we didn't have any, so thank you, Alan. Thanks to the B15 team for keeping me alive, and and of course the students, because if you weren't here, we wouldn't have anything to do. Okay, so what we're going to do, the plan for today is basically we're going to do I'm going to quickly explain what this project is, where it came from, and then I'm going to pass over to our panel, who are going to introduce themselves quite quickly, and then we're going to move on to the questions that have been submitted by you guys and some other people as well. And we're hoping it will just be a bit fluid in the way, because the questions will be read and they'll be on screen, but it's really about the discussion. So let's see what comes back from the panel. And then at the end of it, hopefully, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the time. We'll have a bit of time to take any other questions from the room if you think of anything else. Fingers crossed that all goes to plan. Okay, so very, very quickly, where did this come from? So AiM is the Architect's Index of Model Making, and it kind of originated from a problem, if you like, that is, as technicians, we constantly find students that come in from practice and they love the idea of model making. They want to spend a lot of time in the workshop, but increasingly can't see sort of how it fits into practice. And so that's been kind of made worse by the pandemic, which meant that people didn't have access to a lot of things for a long time, such as workshops or support staff, at really key stages in their education. So this goes on to feed into how model making happens in practice, in that people think of it as being something that gets left behind at university. And not everybody, but a lot of people, it's something that we've noticed. So what we aimed to do was to create this new platform which will bring together practices that do make models and that allow their architects to make models, so that our students can be directed towards a resource where this sort of thing is put front and center. That so far consists of what you can see on the screen there. So this is kind of some screenshots of what the index looks like, the website. The idea is that it's fully searchable, that you'll be able to look at places by location, size, different sorts of resources that are available, and importantly, hearing from the practices themselves about what it is they do and why they do it. So that has gone sort of soft launch live today. There's still lots of things to sort out. It's not perfect, but we're working on it, and the idea is that it will grow and become a kind of focal point for anybody wanting to talk or be involved in model making in this the sort of world of architecture. We launched it with an exhibition, which we're going to go to tomorrow, if any of you are still around, over at Palazzo Bembo. So that features a number of the early kind of investors, if you like, in the idea, that have contributed models to be displayed, and some videos in there as well. Generally, discourse around this topic of why we make in practice. Hopefully you can join us and come over and celebrate that tomorrow as well. So this launch has been supported by lots of other events and things that we're going to try and continue to do. So lots of different exhibitions hopefully to come, and further events like this. The idea of today is that we bring together some of the people that have been involved in that exhibition to hear from them directly on this topic. So we've got 4 speakers, and the first one of them is Simnia, who is going to come up now. So do you want to talk through your slides or just explain who you are, and then feel free to take a seat?
Can you hear me? Oh yeah, I'm usually loud anyway, so this is extra loud. I'm Simnia, Ionescu. I'm architect at AiM, treasurer of Manchester Society of Architects, Manchester School of Architecture alumni, and I'm also Romanian, and there's another Romanian on the panel. After graduating from Manchester School of Architecture, I worked around Manchester for a while until joining AiM in 2023. AiM is one of the leading design practices in the Northwest. Our office is based in an RIBA award-winning Victorian baths that we've converted for several creative industry offices. It's a beautiful space filled with loads of models made by the practice throughout the decades. The practice is known from a broad range of work, including museums and galleries, offices, churches, offices in churches, education, residential hotels, leisure, and community buildings, many of which are within sensitive historic settings, which is kind of my area of work and passion as well. So a bit more about me. This is one of my projects that's currently hopefully going on site soon. But I'm a strong advocate for model making, and as part of the design process, my passion actually started in uni in the B15 workshop, so Scott is a main part of that. My first job after part 2, the practice has recently purchased a 3D printer, and they didn't really know how to use it. They really wanted to, so the desire was there, which was great, but they didn't really know how to get the most out of it. So this is where I came in. I started by making all the models, and then I trained the rest of the staff. It wasn't always easy to justify the value of model making, and not every place that I worked at was on board straight away. But I am proud to see that my efforts actually have kept the practice making models after my departure, so that's great. It wasn't all in vain. And the last slide, I think I've got a bit of time, but I've got a bit to talk about. This is AiM's model making, and it's essential in our studio. We create models at every stage of the design development to explore and communicate massing, spatial relationships, and materiality. These physical models provide a three-dimensional understanding of form, scale, and proportions, fostering intuitive decision-making and deeper engagement with our concepts. Our approach emphasizes the tactile and iterative nature of model making in early stages, sketch models. We create more detailed models as the project moves forward, more refined concepts, and we examine materiality, light, shadows, and at all stages, our models are a valuable tool for discussion, and our clients really appreciate the way we show our work, and as well as consultants and stakeholders, so the value is appreciated, which is great. I had a few more things, but I might save them for the questions. But in an age of digital tools, and AI model making remains irreplaceable in conveying emotion, engaging the senses, revealing insights that drawings and rendering cannot do alone. And it's an integral process of architecture that enhances both creativity and clarity in our approach.
Thank you, Simina. So that's number 1. Joe, are you ready?
Can you all hear me? Very good. Nice to be here. I'm covered in mosquito bites as well, so I'm very, very hot and sweaty. So that's Venice for you. Yeah, super quick. I'm the guy on the left on the screen. When I had a bit more hair, had a bit more beard, that was in COVID. And the right-hand side of that image is a snapshot of an accumulation of about 20 years worth of work in our office. And it was a kind of moment in time when, in COVID, our office emptied. There was about 40, 50 people in the office at the time. Sorry, we're a studio of about 60 people. We're about 20 years old as a business based in London. I think probably the same for many people here overnight, we went from an office with 50 people at desks to an office with one person at a desk, which was me, and everyone else had dispersed. And during the course of 3 months, the models sort of started to speak to me. And I came up with this idea that I should sort of accumulate them all into a room and immerse myself into this collection of models to hear the story of people. And it's something that I've perhaps we'll talk a little bit about today. Our office is based in Hackney, again, we've been making models in these spaces for, as I say, the best part of 2 decades. And as you'll look at, when you go to the exhibition, I think, and actually if you wander around through the Biennale, when people talk about models, they talk about the fact that they're an integral part of practice, which is obvious. I guess the question we might ask ourselves in what means, in what methodology, and how they're employed is something that we might explore today, rather than just the general cliche, I think, that models are important. The project that we've got exhibited is the top right one, and the middle top one, and maybe the top left-hand one, which is a project in East London, which is a sort of grand piece of urban infrastructure. It's a kind of an urban block, multi-use, ranges of scales, and we use the kind of model-making process as an absolute vessel and tool and mechanism to chisel away at an idea. And I've just written this as I was listening to you speak, and I just get through this really quickly, and then maybe it'll come in questions. So, yes, models are extremely important and necessarily integral to practice. Simultaneously, they are complementary, primary, and secondary to digital means and technologies. So again, they don't sit outside of digital, transformation. And obviously, they exist at scale. So, scale of 1 to 20,000, perhaps, to the scale of up to 2 to 1. And again, all models, buildings maybe are the most elaborate form of model making. Model making is defined by projects and equally come to define projects. They are the product of hands, stories, and narratives that shape them. Models are both product and process. Model making does not need expensive kit. Model making does not need a model shop. And it got to me thinking a little bit, William Blake's assertion that you do not need a church to have belief. So you don't need a model shop, although you do have one. Model making should be defined by simplicity, authenticity, intuition, exploration, experimentation, imperfection, lopsidedness, immediacy, unplanned, dynamic, with speed, and repetitious. I'll leave you there.
I think it's you now, Ecaterina. Let me check. Yes. Are you ready?
Hi everyone. My name is Ecaterina Stefanescu. I am a lecturer. I teach architecture at the Grenfell Baines Institute of Architecture at the University of Lancashire. This is newsflash, we're changing the name, so I've got some of my ex-students here who have betrayed UCLan and have now moved to Manchester to do their masters, but they were previously my students in undergraduate. I'm looking at you, Finley, Phoenix, and James. So I have remained in Preston, where I've been teaching, but also we've set up a live action research studio called Other People's Dreams, through which we do research and kind of practical work throughout the Northwest. We work with communities and third sector organizations and arts organizations to create new possibilities, new models for civic infrastructure, for social and public spaces. I don't know what's coming next now, so, it is this one. So for me, model making, I did my postgraduate at my master's at Delft, where there's a very strong culture of model making, and especially large-scale spatial model making. And I've taken that into my own practice, but instead of as a design tool, I use it as analysis and a showcase tool. So, and especially focusing on contested spaces and spaces that have some sort of, well, migrant spaces or marginal spaces in some way. So, for example, this one is an interior of a Romanian shop in Berlin, but it's not the real shop. It's a model at 1:20 made out of cards and paper. There it is. Similarly, we use models with other people's dreams as a way to engage with the public, to engage with communities, because it's such an excessive and easy way to understand about spaces, to understand about the place you are. It's a good method when you're using models to gain insight into the knowledge that's embedded in a place. So we use it for co-design workshops. We use it as a way to test methodologies of construction as well. And you can say that this project that you see there in the middle, which is a public platform, a public space in Blackpool, that platform itself is a kind of a model for a way in which you can regenerate a space with communities rather than from the top down. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? Yep. Great. Hi, I'm Pete. I'm from the UK. I'm half Chinese. My father's from Hong Kong. My mother's from Gloucestershire. And I studied both my bachelor's and my master's in Manchester. Since then, since I graduated from my master's, I've been working at HENN for the last 8 years, and then also in the last couple of years, I've also started teaching as a lecturer for the Berlin International University of Applied Sciences. It's a bit of a mouthful, and there I run design studios. Here you can see some of the models that I was doing in Manchester for my master's thesis project, and for which I won the B15 Model Making Award. And for those of you who aren't familiar with HENN, it's one of the more established German practices. So it was founded in 1947 by Walter HENN. Gunther HENN, his son, took over the company in 1979, and we are currently on our third generation of HENN, Martin HENN, who has been design principal since 2019. So the company originally started off mainly involved with automotive and office and workplace projects, but then since then we've expanded and now work over multiple sectors. We do a lot of science projects. We also do quite a lot of healthcare projects in hospitals as well, but it's always quite a mixture, and it's always quite stimulating to be working on a variety of different typologies. So I started at the practice as an intern for the model workshop, and then since then I became more involved with the design over time, and then I got promoted to associate 2 years ago, so now I'm running competitions, but whatever I'm doing, I'm always really trying to do as much model making as possible and really use that as a method for work. The office also does a lot of computational design and a lot of simulations, stuff like that. But I always believe that model making has a role which can coexist with more digital skills too. So we have locations in Berlin, where I normally work, also in Munich, Frankfurt, and Shanghai as well. Here you can see some photos from the model workshops in Berlin. In Berlin, we work in Alexanderplatz. We have 3 floors of a high-rise, which was the DDR travel ministry, and you can see the space above. It's not a huge amount of space, but then at the same time, we're able to produce pretty much everything in-house. So in Berlin, we have more of an improvised digital setup. We rely quite a lot on laser cutters and 3D printers and more digital forms of model making. And then in Munich, they have a bit more of a traditional setup. So they do have laser cutter and 3D printer, but then also a full woodworking setup as well. And there's quite a lot of collaboration between the two offices as well. So sometimes we'll do stuff for them and vice versa. So it's quite tight-knit. So then here you can see some of the examples of recent models. So we really try and integrate it all the way through the design and construction process from a pre-design stage, where often models, we'll use it for client workshops and to help users determine their needs and develop briefs. Also, within the design process for feasibility studies and competitions, we're always making lots of models internally, which I think really helps alongside more computational methods. Models are also very important in Germany for competitions. Pretty much every competition submission also requires a model, so that's a very key part of the practice. But then after that as well, then we also, in later stages, also use a lot of models there. And that's kind of a fun part, I think. Once you can jump up in scale, you can work at 1 to 100, 1 to 50, 1 to 20, and start to look a bit more at things like material and texture. So I think that's me. So thanks very much.
How's best to do this? Because that mic's good, that's working, isn't it? I think so.
Can you all hear us?
Yeah.
We'll just
might have to
swivel it around or
possibly
something.
share this one. I'm going to ask some questions as well. So.
We will awkwardly lean in or something.
Cozy.
So, thanks a lot, everybody. It's all good. First question. Straight in from Stephen McCusker, who's actually a lecturer at our school, submitted this one. So as you can obviously read it on the screen, I'll read it out. So for the panel, so some people think we are wasting time and materials by making physical models when we can be just as effective with VR. Is this true? What would you say? Don't know how we're going to do this. Whether someone wants to jump in and.
Shall I do the first one?
Sure.
I mean, I guess, does everything need to be about efficiency and effectiveness? I guess is the question. So I think one of the, I just could sort of maybe just sidestepping the question and the answer a little bit, just this idea of the importance of narratives. So maybe the idea of a journey is equally of maybe even more importance than the product itself. So the time it takes to wrestle with an idea, to sort of fold a piece of paper, to cut your finger or whatever, those are sorts of things you don't get in VR. And I guess we, or in sort of digital means. So, just to put that one on the table, I think you don't get any of that with it. And I think that equally has importance. And I would guess we would espouse a kind of combination and complement of the two, a bit to the point you were making really, your last presentation, where you run a digital and a practical and physical thing side by side, and you're kind of complementarily testing both the physical form and the digital form at the same time. So I'll start there, and then maybe...
Yeah, I think models are about craftsmanship, and I think that's what architecture's kind of lost throughout time, especially with the digital era, and models almost bridge the gap between design ideas and the building. So they are still very important and valuable.
And just to add to that, Richard Sennett talks about this evolutionary link between the hand and the eye, and how you can't, it's like the information that you get from touching things, from tactility, from picking something up, is just, it's stronger, and it's different to that you just get from looking at something. So for using VR through, to look at something that isn't even there, when you touch it, you get more out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely agree about the tactility, and I think also with, we also do a lot of VR work as well. We do a lot of real-time rendering, but then it's often a very smoke and mirrors thing as well. You can really fake stuff in VR, which in the model you cannot do, and also there's something a bit more, it's just more real, it's more communal as well. With the VR, you have one person on the headset and everyone watching people bump into walls and things, but then when you have the model, then you really have it in front of you, it's more collaborative, everyone can get involved. It's really about this tactility, which cannot be achieved through digital means.
Yeah, so just to add to that then, it's a lot of the Biennale, I think, although I haven't seen most of it, but from what I've gleaned, is this interface, I guess, between the nature and the digital, and at the centre of that is human existence. And I think the one thing that we've, or I constantly think about, and I think we could all kind of connect to, is this idea of a disconnect. So, increasingly disconnected from nature as a species. We are nature, but the way that we live, civilization is that disconnect. So that's a kind of macro idea. And I think models are, and the model in the VR is a much more narrow version of the same issue in some ways, that the further you go down the line of relying on purely digital means to construct physical spaces and cities, the greater the disconnect is. If you're relying on data rather than experience, I think is a lesser experience of lesser quality somehow. And so the idea of making mistakes, I think that's another critical thing, that somehow the purity of digital modeling and parametricism and data and engineering as a kind of means to sort of create stories and narratives is a pretty sterile place to be. I think, somehow stepping backwards from that, and again, just exploring the simplicity of a sort of an idea created really swiftly from 2 or 3 key materials and a blade is actually kind of quite liberating.
Just quickly add to that before we move on. I think that we have a lot of it in the workshop where there is, as you said earlier, about this kind of importance of the journey, the process, and that it's that bit of it that is actually giving you a lot of unknowns. You can't always, if you know exactly what the answer is and you just sort of jump into the conclusion, you're missing out on.
Also, if everything. Again, I'm overly simplifying it, and I'm probably the biggest technophobe in the room, but if it comes down to something as simple as pressing a button and kind of running an algorithm to produce something, I think the value of that versus the value of something which has been made several times and kind of constructed and not even perfected, but tested, the two things sit side by side. I think you sense it somehow greater. You can feel the hand, you can feel the mistakes, you can feel the errors, the journey. And understanding how the human mind and the brain and this idea of kind of creativity has absolute agency somehow. You look around you, you can't really design this sort of thing. The kind of pattern of time, all of that kind of palimpsest of thing over, it's like that's massively important. And I think people, kind of react to it much more positively than that, in my mind anyway, against something which is extremely pure. And defined by a kind of metric and algorithm. Repeating myself a bit, but...
Saul Bunyan, who is here, do you want to read this out, or should I read it out? Okay, everyone can read out on the screen. What would you define a model to be at your practice? That's quite a broad question, but...
I can start. We define a model as a prototype, as a test for something that might come later, and also we define it as a method of a process and a way to get to a finite thing in the future, a finalized thing that might come at a later stage. So it's a process of figuring stuff out. Just quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely what Joe said, is the journey. The models are the journey, the design journey. They start as an idea, they then turn into solving some issues, some details, and then they could end up as the final product if, not more time than others, they stay as concepts and ideas, because that's the beauty of them, to show the thought process behind them, but they could become the buildings as well.
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, maybe not just physical models. We also do a lot of like digital modeling as well. But I think it's a representation of what is to come. From a physical sense, that can really be anything from very abstract massing models to really one-to-one samples. I remember for a project I was working on where we were doing facades, we were looking at different perforations. So we would spend several days looking just at different holes in sheet metals, which was quite important for sun shading. So, I mean, it was, it could really be anything, I suppose.
Like from your presentation and from what I know of your practice, it seemed to be like there was a clearer role for you guys in Berlin to be doing things that were much more kind of pressured for competition. So you had to do the sort of quick turnaround things in contrast to the Munich office. I don't know if it's that clean cut, but
I think we're both going through the same process, and we're both working to the same deadlines. I don't think it's a case that in Berlin it needs to be very fast and efficient, and in Munich everything's a lot more meditative and kind of learning via making. I think it's just different tools. I mean, I think what it really boils down to is the space that we have available. So we're in a tower, we have certain problems with extraction and maybe also loads for machines, so it's not really possible to get a full wood workshop set up in there. But at the same time, we are still able to deliver a competition or a presentation model. It's just, you just need to maybe be a bit more creative about how you're going to get there.
But that probably brings some unexpected results in itself, that need to do with whatever you've got at that moment rather than having access to everything.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, it's always a certain amount of improvisation. I think we try to avoid happy accidents as much as possible, I think, because at the same time, so normally for a competition, you submit the panels, then what you have 1 week or maybe 10 days to deliver the model after the design. So you have a certain amount of time pressure. So like, for example, we've been really trying to get into casting quite a lot, and because it has a certain tactility and it has a certain quality to the material that you can't really achieve so much with acrylic or 3D printing, but it's much more difficult to control as well. So we were really trying to integrate that into competition models, but it's too difficult to really control it when you have a deadline in say 7 days and the casts might fail, things like that. Pressure.
Joe?
I was just sort of thinking how to answer the question differently. So let's see if I can do it. So we're working on projects. When I talk about project, I talk about maybe building, so the construction process. So if you start a project at stage 0, ROBA stage 0, old school A, and you work your way through to stage 7, and that's the completion. So completion of a project is a year after you've handed the keys over, say. Typically that takes about 12 years. So just let that sink in. So what's the purpose of a model within a 12-year cycle? What's the purpose of architecture, I guess, within a climate crisis and a sort of social, the speed in which you can turn things over through buildings is really slow, actually. And if we're trying to save and pivot and, you look at the world through the lens of the Biennale, you do it through AI and algorithms, you do it through modeling in a digital form, I guess. So where does model making fit in that? I guess back to the points I think we're all trying to grapple with here. On a very basic, it's really simple. They basically capture an idea and they represent it. But it's this idea of ideas and the notion that it could be a presentation model at a certain scale at a certain time. It can be extremely messy. It can fall to pieces the first time you pick it up. All of that is important. So I guess for me, without kind of, again, overburdening the question or the answer, but they are about knowledge and they are about conveying messages at each given time. They're about solving ideas continuously. They are about a bit like an encyclopedia somehow, a physical, visual cycle. They are handing down knowledge continuously to the next model, to the next person. And if you submit yourself to it and you submerge yourself into a space that's about models, I think some of that sort of sticks to you, and you get a sense of how the practice or how architecture and how the creative process works, which is what I was trying to do with that kind of installation in 2020, is just to sort of convey that message back, that there's something about a mass of models, a sea of models with different techniques of scales, which has incredible power, I think, and potency and agency for the creative process.
It's a great image. I don't know if you've seen it, we put it in our book for the exhibition.
Oh, right, good, nice.
Okay, next one. Is it ever too late to design, in a design, to make models? And that's from Simon Vincent, he's a technician and a postgrad student, I think, in Brighton. So is it ever too late to design a model in a project?
Again, I think it's for what reason, for what output? Yeah, you go for it.
No, no, that's
No, right.
it. Basically depends. No,
Yeah.
the short answer is, well, no, depends on
Yeah.
the main purpose,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah, it can be propositional, it can be reflective.
Exactly.
It can be analytical, it can be explorative. It depends what the purpose of the model is. So never too late.
What do you want to get out of that model? I guess
Yeah.
that's the question back,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think like I can sense his role as a technician in asking that question.
Yeah.
In that there's students not being able to find time to integrate a model in a way they think it should happen, and therefore thinking, okay, it's beyond that point now. So whatever I produce has got to be super perfect, or rather than explaining just a bit of it. That's what we find, that it's all about time constraints. People haven't got time for that. And I think there is an element of maybe a lack of confidence in their abilities to do things at speed as well, because of perhaps spending too much time on computers and phones.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a technophobe as well, you might gather. But yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for like thinking how could it be useful like at this point, like what am I trying to communicate?
Yeah. I mean, I think model making can be complicated and it can be intimidating, and then you have to sort of go for it. You have to apply yourself to it. You have to get used to the process. You have to be comfortable with the fact that your models might not be as accomplished as the person sitting next to you, and just be comfortable with that, and just be kind of focused on what the models are trying to do. And I was sort of thinking your reference about perforated piece of metal. If the perforated piece of metal has got a fold in it, then how easy is it to sort of get a perforated piece of material, paper card, and just fold it into a corrugated thing and put it onto a really simple framework and then hold it up to a light and shine a light against it and think, is the model, that is all of the time and energy that I'm spending in a digital space going to create the effect that I'm looking for, sort of thing? And it doesn't take long. Again, you don't need expensive equipment to do that. You don't even need to do it at scale. It doesn't even need to be accurate. It could just be purely crystallizing an idea. So I would suggest that if you're not model making, it's too late. You should be continuously model making. So if your building's on site and you haven't made a single model, that's when it's too late, in a way. You've got to be doing it from the get-go.
Yeah, I think, for sure it can require a certain amount of courage, and maybe it isn't the most beautiful model, but it really doesn't matter. I think some of the best or most influential models that are made are the roughest ones as well. They're the ones that only take like 5 minutes and often it is the best way to communicate an idea. It doesn't really need to be really beautiful or really polished. It's just a means of communication.
Yeah, I think the simpler and quicker and more intuitive a thing is, I think the better it is as well. If you spend time agonizing, you're just wasting, all you're doing effectively, if you're doing that, if you go down this kind of rabbit hole of how to make the perfect model, you've taken your eye off the prize, you've taken your eye off the purpose of the project. The project is a holistic thing. You're using models quickly to kind of assimilate ideas. And if you can do it really intuitively, without overthinking it, without being overly accurate, to explore things whilst running a digital means alongside, I think that's the best chance a project has.
Yeah, I think it's both the case for models and design. Sometimes it's too much. If you put too much work in, then it just ends up a bit overbaked, a bit too over-designed. I think it needs to be somewhat instinctual to a degree.
Looks like the sort of thing you buy in Argos. But then,
Exactly,
you know,
yeah.
you've overworked it. It's like a kind of pretend, it's like a sort of toy town.
Yeah, like a model
It's
railway or something.
Yeah, it's like that's not the purpose of what are you trying, why model every single crack in a, you know, it's like what's the purpose of that really? Or maybe there is a purpose, but I can't quite see it.
How do you choreograph your physical model making with your digital model making? You kind of alluded to that a little bit in this answer, so especially in the early phases of design. In your own workflow, can you discern how each drives the design thinking process? So I suppose that, as we've already touched on that, that's more about, can we kind of speak specifically about the sort of early design phase and how you would decide to do thing one or the other, I suppose?
Yeah.
I think at very early stages, which I think this question is about, technology and CAD and whatever is quite restrictive, so I think you can get into a hole of and not being able to get out of it. So model making and any physical drawing, sketches and all that, I think that's the only way forward at early design stages, because otherwise you just get stuck and you can't evolve the design. But that's my personal opinion.
I think model making can also just be a collaborative and communication tool. So at whichever stage of the design process you're at, especially, I mean, it depends, but I can see whatever client you might have, doing a model even on the spot, making models with clients, with users, as a way, at various stages through the process. It's just a way to bring people on board and to allow people into your process and into the whatever the project you're designing. So I would include it in kind of in as this part of a process of design, not only in the early stages, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for us, they both feed into each other. So then maybe we would start with just blocks of foam and then very instinctually just modeling things. But then maybe that would lead to something, you go and draw it on the computer, then maybe you're making a bit more of a higher resolution model. Maybe then you're starting to laser cut stuff. And then, then you would maybe have a design meeting. Then maybe all the model, then you create more models based off that. Maybe they get chopped up and edited. But yeah, it's always a bit of both. It's kind of like a loop. You just kind of repeat the loop and just refine it over time. And yeah, I would say the two are, for us at least, very integrated. It's not really either or digital or analog, but a combination of the two.
We've recently completed a project, a building, 2 or 3 years ago, and again that was a sort of 12-year process, in essence, again, it's a workplace, but the skin of the building is a sort of play on this idea of Victorian engineering, I guess. So it's about arches and piers and lintels and so forth and floor plates. Very simple, and brick. Lots of questions that we could ask in that lot anyway. But I think we went on a journey quite quickly, I think from memory, where we distilled through a kind of forensic analysis of existing buildings in an area of London, East London. We distilled and abstracted aspects of existing buildings in the context and tried to play them back through a kind of iterative model-making process really early. So we felt at the beginning of this project that the building should have weight and it should have mass and it should be built of 2 or 3 key materials. And again, that's quite a dangerous thing to do from the outset, is to decide what the building is constructed of from the very get-go. But it seemed like a means, and it was a set of tools and ingredients that would basically sit in a relatively comfortable way, I hate the word, with the surrounding context, which had conservation importance. There were historic buildings there, so on and so forth. A bit like this sort of thing you can see here. You know, we were, again, just to replaying the same message really, we're working in Revit, we are BIM 19650 accredited, which is the high standards of, you know, coordinated digital modeling. We have laser cutters, 3D print, we have everything. But we were playing the story of this building through physically making from scratch molds and plaster casting, lintels, piers, bricks, plaster casting mullions and windows and making them, and trying to work out how do we reinterpret an arch, which is an elevational treatment, which was doing a thing at the time. So brick, what does a brick want to be? It wants to be an arch. You know, when you're doing it in a modern way, it doesn't work like that anymore. So skins are veneers. So all this skin was doing was conveying a sense of something which is 100 years old. So we broke it down into a series of component parts. So at the same time as modelling a lintel, a pier, a sill, a so-called cornice detail, we're running digital modelling to work out how to abstract the building into a sequence of components which could then be off-site fabricated in any part of the world in the most efficient means and the lowest form of waste and carbon with the highest quality to be brought back to site and assembled in the same way that we were assembling the model, if that makes sense. So we were sort of thinking the entire process, this sort of 12-year loop through the simplicity of almost like Lego, putting these things together. That was then driving the digital model, which created the tools for a subcontract supply chain to then fabricate hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these extremely complex pieces, which would then be bolted back together. So again, I can't even separate the way in which we built the building, I guess, from the first model. It's, again, a continuous process, all of them being one idea, one process which was sort of driven from beginning to end holistically, I suppose.
This question from Wei, who's in the room, I think. In the practice of model making, what have been some of your biggest challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Challenges are part of the process. I can't.
I don't have a proper answer for that. I don't think, because like you say, that's the point of them, and it's constantly a kind of process of navigating and working your way through the challenges that every project throws up. So I can't think of one major challenge. I think it's an environment.
Running out of
glue.
Running out of knife blades.
Maybe that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Running out of paper.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Like I say, if being genuine. This is a genuine sort of feeling that if the model looks a bit broken and a bit crusty and whatever, I sort of spend more time looking at those sorts of things perhaps than a sort of finished thing. So even if there isn't glue, or a piece of tape or a piece of material, someone has basically been had a bit of sort of self-ingenuity to sort of work their way through that and come back and say, so this is supposed to be made of green card, but actually it's a blue plastic. We don't have any plastic, but the same principles. It's still a thing that you can talk around. So yeah, I think maybe the challenge is the mind.
No, I do kind of agree, and I think it's one of the big challenges. I think is perhaps, I would say it is the mind. I think while, say, Martin HENN is very on board with model making, some other partners in the practice might not necessarily see the value of it quite as much, especially for later phases where the budgets are very tightly controlled, and it's kind of convincing them sometimes to the value of also producing models alongside all the Revit and the more kind of serious planning topics as well. But then, I think whenever models are utilised at a later phase, you can really see the value in it, for sure. And then also logistical challenges too. Say, especially for deadlines, sometimes you need to really calculate backwards from the deadline date how long the 3D printing is going to take, how much material you need, making sure you have enough supplies so you're not running out of spray paint at the last minute, that kind of thing. Logistics, and I usually try and calculate roughly 50%, I think, kind of contingency time, just in case. Like, you never know what's going to happen as well.
Well, I would agree with everyone, actually, and I think I personally had some challenges in proving the value of model making in some practices. So I guess if you're in a practice that encourages model making, then great, there's no challenges because there's no right or wrong in a model. I think when it's potentially there's commercial practices that the budgets are very tight and they care about that a lot, and they don't see the creative process behind model making as much as we do. That's a big challenge that I think you can only overcome it by making the model and then proving to them that it's of value when it comes to a meeting, when it comes to showing to a client. And it goes back to that idea of touching something. The second someone sees something physical, they understand the value of it.
And I think I can see that there's a parallel question to this, which is about this understanding what the model should be or could be, in that, like you're saying, that it doesn't matter if it's kind of falling apart and it's not perfect, but because it's still helping to convey an idea. I know that a lot of our students are very hung up on it being absolutely perfect, and it's just like, it's not about that.
Well, here's one I've thrown just as a sort of, again, just to sort of pick up on your point actually, which is quite nice. So if we think about architecture as requiring a new aesthetic, perhaps, so the aesthetic of climate crisis, and the idea of conservation and reuse. So again, lots of what we talk about here, I would guess, is about how to construct something in its totality from fresh. Although you've just done the shop you made was actually kind of, counter to that position. But I guess most people here are sort of designing buildings from scratch up, and their projects are all about how do we make this perfect thing. And it's a building which sits on a building, and Zaha has got a lot to kind of answer for. But actually, the notion of new aesthetics through this sort of new lens of kind of understanding the actual potent value of materials, and the idea of reuse and the circular economy and the donut, that's a kind of difficult thing to sort of get into the model making environment, I think, just thinking it out loud really. So maybe that's the challenge that we haven't quite faced yet, which is how to basically drive model making through that same lens where you're maybe recycling models, making sure that every single material that is in a model shop comes from an ethical sort of source. There are no kind of toxins, there's no chemicals, there's nothing hazardous. That would be an interesting thing, and something that we're going through a process of B Corp accreditation as a practice, which has taken years to get. I know I'm really boring. And part of that is you kind of, as part of the process of that accreditation, you have to basically go through, it's like a 6-point plan, and in there somewhere is practice, and in there somewhere is materials and your supply chain, and in that there'll be a model shop. And it's like, where's all your stuff coming from? And can you trace it? And actually being on pinpoint on top of every single material which comes through the workshop, and where it goes and what bins it goes in. So getting rid of kind of expanded foams and all sorts of, et cetera, would be the next challenge, I think, for everyone. And actually and to challenge everyone when they're making models through your course, is so to tell me where it's all from and prove and evidence that it's from the most ethical means, and, it's circular or something, or it was an idea and it's morphed into another idea. That's kind of interesting, I think.
We recently just got B Corp, and actually, and it's been such a long process. And I guess the fact that we are a medium practice, small to medium practice, it's a bit easier to track everything. But actually, going back to B15, that's basically your main thing. Is like you always reuse, and all the students here know. You're just like, oh, can I take that bit of scrap of ply that it's in the bin because someone else used it, and it's like, and then you always take the models and then break them apart. And that's just such an important.
It kind of, part of it as well, and we're going sort of off piece a little bit, but it's fine, it comes into another question that David Chandler put about kind of longevity of things, and being sure that if you're going to make something and put a lot of investment into it in terms of the material consumption, is it justifiable if you can say, well, this is going to be used for the next 10 years as some sort of reference, or is it just because you want something to look very nice at the degree show for 2 weeks? Because that's the kind of thing that happens, and I find that there's a lot of people that when they skip this process and then suddenly want to do it late in the day because they realise they've not got much on their degree show display and they want a model to show. the results and the choices made are always a compromise, and they're always away from that, is this a sustainable thing? Because that's the last thing they're bothered about. It's just about having a thing because they've not planned for it. So you kind of have to, like you're saying, it's starting from the start, so that you're constantly learning from the process to realise what is beneficial and not, and that in itself is sustainable. You know, that's sustainable behaviour. Also, just to say that, you know, sustainability is not always about using a material that says it is sustainable, because sometimes if something already exists and you've got it in abundance, it's more sustainable to use that than it is to go and buy a new product that says it's sustainable. Just depends, you know, how you're looking at what you're using. And we try a lot in the workshop to, like you say, to do that, but Lara's very proactive. We're trying to get this thing called LEAF accreditation. She's very, very on that at the moment, and it's a similar thing in that you have layers of like, well, where does it come from? How does it get there? Etc. Etc.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would be good to introduce that more into the way students' projects were done, you know, from an academic point of view, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, sorry, do you
No,
please
you go.
No,
I'm just preparing.
all right, so yeah, I think especially with the use of foam as well, that's really, we're still trying to figure out the best way of doing it. So we are doing a lot more 3D printed models using PLA, which is like a bioplastic, then trying to use foam as well. Also with PLA, you can recycle it as well. So, there's a company in Berlin that you can ship them to, and then it can be broken down. But then it's just there's something. Yeah, with foam, there's just something that's a lot quicker and a lot more intuitive that you can work with instead of having to 3D print everything. So that's really the challenge for us, I think, how to try and eliminate that as much as possible and in sustainable ways.
I was just going to say in the discussion about material use in model making, that's why I prefer to use a lot of Amazon boxes. So everything that looks like an Amazon box.
We don't endorse Jeff being here.
Oh yeah, obviously not. Any kind of boxes, not only from, cereal boxes, I don't know, coffee boxes, whatever, anything, any packaging. And also this is a way that actually one of the challenges about doing model making with communities as an engagement process, and a co-design process, is that what you were saying, I think before, there's a reluctance to doing something that looks like you need a skill and craftsmanship for. It is a reluctance to kind of pick up a piece of paper and try to make something with someone who is, you know, a professional model maker. But when you don't have precious materials, where you just have boxes and recycled cardboard, that allows, there's a kind of there's a familiarity, and a kind of the preciousness disappears. And I think this is something that I've been trying to do as well with my students, because again, there's this idea where you're reluctant to do something because you think it's, you know, you're wasting, you're buying this material and it's going to be crap, and it's going to you know, it's not going to come out as you want it to. So any kind of recycled material, I'm a strong advocate for, because it allows for familiarity, for immediacy, and a kind of an engagement that is just friendly and welcoming, I suppose. So yeah. But actually, I'm having a conversation now with myself. Another problem with that, though, is that there is a lot of, sometimes, and I don't want to be critical, but sometimes seeing really beautiful models that you guys make can be slightly off-putting for some people, some students, because they think that, you know, I'm not going to be able to do anything like that. So that's one of the challenges, I would say, for the students and some of the people I work with as well. When we're talking about making a model, there's this thing of like, I cannot make something as beautiful as that, and that's where I come in. So again, strong advocate for using paper, cardboard, anything that doesn't look like it's made up by a technician, a professional model maker. Sorry.
Photographing models well also changes this.
Oh yes, yes. Any crap model, if you put it in a photo booth, that will do it. Yeah.
But then I think it's just different environments as well. I mean, also if you're at university, you don't need all these really pristine models, and if anything, they're going to be a lot more sterile as well. And yeah, you don't need all these really beautifully crafted, like very nice acrylic things. Like there's an environment for that, and it's not really. It doesn't really have the charm that something really thrown together with recycled materials does.
Okay, I think we went quite off that, but in a good way. It's a good conversation. So, okay. So, David Chandler, who is in the audience, fantastic gent. Academic, urbanist, and artist is his preferred description. Okay, so the famous 16th century wooden model of the Duomo of Pavia has traces of woodworm. Unplanned intervention. How can models at scale be constructed to demonstrate future deterioration, changes of function, and planned adaptation? That is a question.
Do you want to start?
Well, I guess there are three conditions that you're describing there. Changes of function, absolutely, because everything that we design today, and possibly planned and unplanned adaptation, that's the kind of the centerpiece, the nucleus of architecture at the moment. It should have that adaptability. How it works over time is quite difficult, I think. We're designing buildings to be constructed at the moment which have a particular grid, which allows it to be in one time a workplace, but to be easily retrofitted to be residential. That's a thing which, again, in the UK, there's a thing called permitted development, which allows you to flip-flop between commercial and residential very, very quickly. The thing is, what you're trying to find there is that you're flipping between the two programs, and the two programs don't necessarily fit one another, so you end up with spaces which aren't, how can I say it? Again, not particularly using, maybe not ideal. I was going to use the word perfect, but not ideal. So deep floor plans of an office don't convert into housing very well. But if you plan for it at the beginning, so your model making, your thinking, your grids, etc., can easily do that. So I think on a really pragmatic level, it's very, very simple to do that. I think the idea of deterioration is kind of a bit more interesting and a bit more exciting. And I guess you could mock it, you could sort of suggest it, but I was thinking, I think you used the word prototype at the very beginning, and I guess that's the thing, is that maybe in something like this, what you might want to do is to think it through a longer lens, and maybe you're doing it with, it's not just a sort of model that sort of comes out of a model making workshop as a student perhaps, but actually it's a sort of collaborative piece whereby you're working as a research project with others that might be a concrete-based thing, a timber-based thing, might be some other kind of mixed thing, something cast, something folded. And you're doing it over a period of years, and perhaps you're analysing that, and that might be something that you sort of play back in different models, perhaps. One way I could see it happening. It's quite difficult to contrive deterioration in a realistic way, I think, perhaps. It might be there's a romantic thing that you can splice it and tell the story a little bit, and maybe that's fine. But to give it agency and authenticity, I think deterioration just takes time. Unless you basically kick a model around a room and, then you've deteriorated it, I suppose.
I think the question that I'm interested in this on this topic is the kind of the social changes and the usage. It's not necessarily a deterioration, but it might be a kind of a lack of usage even sometimes, where you're designing for something to happen and then that thing does not happen. And this is something that we're really focusing on in the work that we do. So for example, that platform that we build in Blackpool, we'll build it in a place where there is a lot of leveling up funding to potentially demolish the existing community centre and then build a flashy new building. But to be honest, nobody really knows what a new building would be used for. So that platform, even though it's, it's an external space, but it's a model to test how civic public use can take place organically in that part of Blackpool without spending, millions of pounds on a new building that in 5 years' time becomes obsolete and deteriorates through lack of use, lack of money for that, for the use, changes in population, in kind of the social makeup of that space itself. So, like you were saying, it's almost like you need the research, you need this kind of university type of kind of approach to buildings in this way.
Sure. It's for sure. It's a very interesting question. And definitely with the adaptivity, often that is worked in for us with models showing, especially for labs. We do a lot of labs and office combinations, and it's always very important to show the shifting around between different programs. For sure. Yeah, the deterioration one that is interesting. And the fact is, I guess, as practitioners, we are generally looking into this sort of selling of a certain utopian vision as well. So it's not really something that has really crossed my mind before. I mean, for sure, you could do it in interesting ways to do with patina, perhaps, but in terms of true deterioration, no, I don't know. It's not something that we've ever really looked into, but maybe we should. Yeah.
I think part of this, in a strange way, sort of relates a little bit to what we're doing with this index and like archiving in general, in that models generally aren't kept. They're kept for a period of time, but then they get put in a cupboard or forgotten about, or a bigger project comes along and they move on. So the fact that that particular model has survived is remarkable, really, that it's that old, because there's not that many, as you know, that kind of last that long. So yeah, it kind of does feed into this subject about like valuing this practice and how you look after it. But I think the models being tools means that things are going to deteriorate naturally in certain ways, and sometimes that might work to your advantage and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, look at Venice. It's like sort of preserved in a state of deterioration. And yes, we could repaint the walls, but then that wouldn't look as nice. So there's sort of this kind of, it's a strange balance, but thanks for that question, David. I knew you'd come up with something. Okay. As future architects, how can we embrace the exciting wave of digitalization while still cherishing and preserving traditional skills like model making and hand drawing?
I think it's what you were saying before, that you need both alongside each other.
Yeah. I think we may have answered this one, surreptitiously, but it's a both and situation, isn't it?
I think
not one or the other.
Yeah.
No.
I think
how can we? I guess it's a sort of question. In some ways, I just find the question interesting. That the question exists, I think, is sort of something we can perhaps talk about. Why do people think that you can't do it? I just find that sort of it doesn't come into my thinking that you somehow we're going to do a model. What, we're going to do a model? Yeah. When do we get time to do? Literally, it's there. It's a sort of. So what is it out there that people are thinking? Oh, how do we embrace this then? What's happened your side to make it a question? I guess maybe that's one for you to answer later.
I don't know if she wants to answer that. Ian's in the room.
I just feel like during my undergrads, it was COVID as well, so we were not actually doing any models, and everything was in digital. So if anyone did model, it was like exciting and really unusual. So I guess that's the reason why my generation and we as future architects are so excited and creative and everything.
I think that sort of comes down to the idea that association, that there's a sort of process and a space to do it in, I guess. And I think that's what I'm trying to kind of dispel, that you need expensive equipment in order to make a model. You've got a kitchen table. Everyone has a surface, whether it's a kitchen table or a cupboard or chest of drawers that you can fold and cut a piece of paper on, fold it and put a camera in front of it and photograph it. And that's what you should be embracing. And I guess COVID therefore has a lot to answer for, doesn't it? That somehow you're on a Zoom call and you think that somehow because you're in a digital space, back to the VR question, that model making doesn't have a space anymore. And I guess we're here to tell you that's, not true. Yeah.
I think in general I am optimistic that there is a space for both, but then having gone round most of the Biennale and also the Palazzo Bembo, I also don't think it's a vintage year for models.
It's not intended to be though. That's the danger. I think the Biennale this year is driving an agenda which is all about technology and digital, and actually the means to kind of think things through, the physical means, the haptic quality, the kind of, it's not part of this conversation. You need to get out into the Giardini and see some of the pavilions out there where there's a definite hand and craft and materiality and haptic quality which perhaps the Biennale isn't sort of interested in this year.
No, for sure there's some really excellent stuff, like the Spanish Pavilion in particular.
Yes,
that was really special. Yes. But then I think also maybe, I don't think it's a case of model making dying out, but then I think maybe it's just to do with collaboration and also maybe perhaps especially in the curation, perhaps they have slightly undervalued the use of physical models or as a storytelling tool as well. I mean, it's a lot of panels and a lot of quite static content.
Yeah. Maybe it's also that kind of lowering benchmark syndrome that we all hear about, perhaps the short gentleman at the back, the academic, who's kind of talking about 16th century model and woodworm. There's a sort of beautiful sense there of something. And I guess, someone who's born in 2000, God, shows my age, 2002 or something, would see a kind of, just be absolutely at home with the sort of digital means. You're doing it now, you're on phone, you're kind of WhatsApping away. That somehow the idea of the model as a kind of primary thing has just floated out the room. If you haven't been to the Giardini, I think the Spanish one is good, but maybe go to the Denmark, the Danish pavilion, nice. Which the building itself becomes a sort of almost like it's deconstructed. It's through this idea that almost the building itself is like this giant model, and you're mining this model, you're mining this building, and you're relocating, moving everything around in the pavilion. And I think they're about halfway through a process, and it might be a research process. And I think, again, it's all back to this idea of making things and solving things through the physical act of just getting stuck in, roll your sleeves up, get a jimmy wrench under a slab, take it up and see what you've got, stacking it, playing with it, putting it back together. It's not even revolutionary. It's almost like, it's a century back how we used to do things.
I think maybe what I was getting at
fresh.
is that perhaps, I think, for sure it is possible for these to coexist, but also it perhaps does need a certain amount of initiative to do that as well. I think so for my work, I don't have to make loads of models. I could just be sat there on Rhino or Revit the entire time. But then it's thinking how to represent something, how to communicate things. And often models is the best way. It's the most interactive way. It's the most tactile way. It's for sure it can be the most effective one.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe education can do something about it, because the new I know you are, but I think it's because it's time and made this and the skill that this used to be a main skill to have to show something in 3D. Now you can show it in 3D in BIM, and the skill that the new generation has to make a 3D model digitally it's
extraordinarily difficult. I would say an extraordinarily difficult time to go into architecture right now compared to when I was doing it 30 odd years ago, maybe even longer ago. So, back in these sorts of conversations that we're having now, the phone, honestly, I didn't even have one of those when I started architecture. That's how old I am. And I guess what's happened now is that the process of architecture, it's been capitalized, it's digitized, it's owned by sort of technology and the tech bros, I think I heard the term this morning, and the simplicity, and also if you see architecture and the kind of evolution of an idea through that window, that lens, but also think of how buildings are procured. So buildings aren't built anymore. Buildings are kind of machined and assembled. It's a completely different sort of type, it's a completely different paradigm. So yeah, absolutely, Rhino and digital means and Revit makes total sense, because the way in which buildings are constructed, you have to basically be able to prove before anything hits the ground that you've fully coordinated absolutely everything. Back to the VR, you can walk through a building and see every single clash and unclash it. So you've got this kind of super kind of collaboration of engineers, of architects, of urbanists, of money makers and money spenders who can see it and prove that they've actually engineered all the risk out of it. So when the thing goes together, hypothetically, the thing is assembled in a particular way. That maybe that is the challenge. You know, in that world, in that new order, how does the kind of model have a sense? How do we re-enshrine the value of the haptic and again the kind of impurity back in the process?
Yeah, I mean, it's as advanced as all of those different things are. The thing that we're building is physical, it's real, and it's supposed to be inhabited. So, like, I find it, like you say, like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to somehow engage with a physical thing as part of that process, because that hasn't changed. You know, the technology to do it might have changed, but the thing you're trying to produce is still a kind of experienced thing that's touched.
I mean, we exist in a culture where you have concept architects and executive architects. So we don't have architects anymore. So you know, we are constantly. You know, we're good at what we do. I tell you, we can do it. We can build what we design. That's our kind of purpose for being. Is that from the beginning of a project through to the end, we can deliver it. But we still, at about stage 2, stage 3, you have to battle with broadswords clients and procurement systems to keep on the job, because generally what happens is by the time you've got planning, the project is pulled away from you. You almost have to re-tender to keep the project, and it's given to someone else who will deliver it and engineer it in a particular way, technicians. So again, it's a cultural thing. You know, the culture of architecture doesn't, in some ways, embrace it anymore. And I think, again, it does come back to your point. You've got to enshrine it back in education. You've got to get people to understand it from the get-go. First thing you do is you don't draw anything, you make a thing. Without a drawing, almost.
You're preaching to the converted. So it's not... Yeah, with me, I obviously, you know, think that that's very much the case. But I would also say that you know, that doing it, and I don't know this from experience of going into practice, but I know it from other aspects of my life, is that if you want to do something, just do it. You know, don't wait to be told to do it. I think that's the problem, is if you go into practice and think, I need to be told when I'm going to do that thing I know is really going to be, like, benefit my understanding of something. You know, just do it. If you know, that's what you're learning at university, and you're picking up these skills, and sort of reflect on what you've got from that experience and then apply it, I would say. Yeah, certainly. I think I was having this conversation only yesterday with somebody. Probably was. It's been a long few days. But yeah, anybody want to add anything else to that before we move on? Nope. Good question. Okay. This is specifically for Ecaterina, apparently, especially Ecaterina. The process of model making as a tool for collaboration is obviously important. Can the panel, especially Ecaterina, expand on its potential as a means of generating social cohesion and purpose, whether or not the thing being modelled is realised?
That's a lovely question.
And that is from David Hassan.
Yeah. Hello, David. He'll be watching this when it comes, when it gets published. So this is very much exactly what my practice is, and our work that we've been doing with other people's dreams. The idea of making as a collaborative tool is something that we strongly believe in. And again, going back to the Blackpool platform project, that only took shape because we worked in collaboration with the community there. So that wasn't something that, it wasn't a project that was built with anyone else that was external. It was a completely collaborative project in which all the decision making was taken on site with the future users, with people from the community center there, a kind of a stakeholder group that got together. It was built on site between us, so it was a team of 3 academics, myself, Lee, and Sam Eddington, and with volunteers and residents there that kind of we all learned together how to pour concrete. It's made out of timber decking and terrazzo that uses demolition rubble from a pub that was on the site. So we learned how to mix concrete, how to create beautiful terrazzo, how to grind, how to polish, and we kind of set up a workshop in the community space garden there. And the whole idea is that because we kind of didn't know what we were doing either, we all learned together, and this process of learning together, sharing knowledge, sharing insight, and making something together physically, very importantly, physically, that creates ownership, and not just a sense of ownership, but real ownership of a public space. And it allows for people to collaborate in a way that's natural, that's not contrived, that's not set up. So previously, community members that would never even say hello to each other now had to figure out how to paint something together and how to polish some concrete and then fix it all, put in and make something that they were all going to then learn how to share as well. So that's more of a proper project, let's say. And in terms of model making, when it comes to models themselves, paper models, cardboard models, again, it's what I was saying before about not having a precious material to work with, going into a space, meeting some people with loads of colored paper and cardboard around, and just giving them agency and encouraging them to just use their hands, and then conversation starts, ideas emerge, ambitions, desires for something in the future, without having any kind of plan, without turning it up there with any plan. Stuff just happens when you give people some scissors and some colored paper and some glue and tape. So that's in my case.
I hope you're happy with that answer, David.
That was a very nice answer. I thought maybe I'll just try and get through this as quick as I can. So if you just look around you, the walls of this building, and actually most of the Arsenale, is built in a thing called brick. And as we know, brick comes from a thing called clay. And actually, as we know, clay is a thing which takes millennia or thousands of years to make. And to make a brick, you cut the thing out the ground, you make it in the old days, you'd had bits of wood and someone would slap the clay into the mold, shove it around a bit, slice it off the top thing, hand it to someone else. They would take the kit and they would either air dry it for about 2 days and then put it in a kiln. That's how you used to make it. And you'd be able to make, brick fields and factories in the UK would make thousands and thousands of bricks every day, sort of thing. Obviously, that doesn't happen anymore in the same way. So old buildings, in the old ways, buildings would be made of the ground that the buildings stand on. But over time, we've come to associate with brick as this idea of the word, vernacular, and vernacular meaning a kind of place which is, it defines the place within which you stand. So it becomes highly contextual, it becomes historical. It's a thing you would just associate buildings with bricks. And London, almost this entire urban grain is made of these handheld things, right? The problem with clay is that it's a finite resource. As I say, it takes a long time to make. So there's one idea about actually carving the ground, taking clay out of the ground, putting it into a kiln. So there's a sort of destructive process at the point in which you extract the clay, point one. So that's destructive in terms of time, meaning, and biodiversity. You put the clay into a kiln and then you fire it, CO2, greenhouse, da-da-da-da. So again, clay bricks are a problem. But they define human society. They encapsulate and manifest culture, politics, history, sociology, etc., etc. So back to this point, we think that's quite an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing to tackle. Is that pretty much every time that we're putting a new building into a London fabric, there's this conversation with the planning authority, which is this idea that it has to be in keeping, which is like a real kind of trench warfare conversation about what things should look like in the context of climate change and all those sorts of things. Brick, 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 brick. Brick, brick is a problem. And I guess the thing about that is that when you're dealing with committees that vote on these things, so you spend a long time and the thing, you could vote, is it made of brick, hands in the air, we support it sort of thing. So it's a challenging thing. And I think that not enough people outside of the construction industry, probably most people in the construction industry don't really grapple with this anyway, but outside don't quite make that association that brick is a difficult, carbon-intensive material to use. So how would you go about breaking that subject matter down? You go through a collaborative, workshop-based process of getting people, which we're doing at the moment, school kids, adults, members of the community, dropping into our office at the moment. We've got this clay culture carbon workshop. You throw some clay in front of them, and you do it in a workshop, and you get them to make a tile out of clay. And we've got thousands, tens of them in the space at the moment. And you go through this process. So again, we did one workshop, we had about 40 people. They made a tile, the tile was about so big. And then there was a question posed at the end to everyone. These are kind of unknowledgeable in the way that we're talking about kind of the application of architecture and construction. Should this tile be fired or not? And it's a qualitative, environmental, socio, biodiversity, carbon conversation. Is the tile of such value that we should basically harm the planet in some way, the butterfly effect, by firing it? And we just step back and let that conversation start. And it's really interesting how people and we're talking about sort of teenagers, just pre-university, grappling with a complex subject. Without any influence, you find it was about 50-50. So 20 people decided that their tile wasn't up to a standard to impact the earth any further than it gone, so you'd leave it to be air dried. And 20 decided that their tiles were of standard, that should be fired, and therefore put CO2 into the atmosphere. And all of that conversation only really comes out through a kind of workshop, collaboration, hands dirty and making sort of thing. There's my answer.
Very good.
Okay, I'm conscious of the time and the heat, but we had a kind of last. One of the last questions that came in, Batista Lopez, who's a model maker. First one from a model maker, I think, that we've had. So what's your take and approach to participation maquettes? And this is exactly what we were just talking about. Topics such as engagement and playfulness come to mind, but is there a different thought process when conceptualizing these maquettes and how they adapt through a participation session versus a representation maquette, which I guess is something that would you maybe do in practice? I think that's what it's referring to. So question is, what is your thoughts on doing that kind of thing? And we've just kind of touched on it. Really. I think that was good. Do you do much of that in
participation?
Yeah, so you have people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely for a pre-design stage. Yeah, we would definitely build models for workshops or models for. We were recently doing a project for the University of Jena where they were working out a new master plan, and they wanted, it really helped visually to to represent it, and everyone was sticking stuff on the model, everyone was like, kind of like drawing stuff, chopping things off, but then, we would for sure use a different process to make it more interactive. I think at the moment, especially a lot of the more representational models we do with more 3D printing. I think firstly that's to get away with foam, but it also makes it a lot less interactive. It makes it a lot easier. You can just run the 3D printer overnight. There's less manual work involved. There's a kind of very easy transition from Rhino to the 3D print. But then you do lose a certain element of that interactivity as well, and that's super important. I mean, also, I think for internal design meetings as well, I think sometimes we do fall into the trap a little bit of making everything 3D printed, and therefore it becomes less easy to modify on the spot, less easy to work with. So I think it's all really about finding the right balance and the right level of interactivity, sort of defining certain parameters but keeping other ones more flexible.
I think it's interactive models are very important, and sometimes maybe we forget how important they are when speaking to the community, for community engagement, and just allowing people to change things, and then they become part of it, and they feel like they're part of this, and it's not just our building, it's their building as well. And I think that's the beauty of model making, that kind of goes back to the previous question as well. They're meant to be changed. I think your first model will never be the final building that's going to end up being in that, and that's really our aim. That's what we're aiming to do, to facilitate the change. I think I do have an example from university. One of my models, our models, was a group project. It was an Aldo Rossi type theatre box. It was a model of the hacienda, which is no longer there. But the whole aim was for people to come and shuffle those drawers around, and no matter which order they are in, the space is still there. And I guess that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Just wanted to add one more point about this, is that the worry here is that this effort of kind of using models as a participatory tool can become tokenistic, and this is something that we're trying really hard to not do, which is why we're trying to involve people not in just the model making process, but we're also in the making of the actual thing itself. And this is just a worry, and something that we're trying very hard not to do, because there's a lot of tokenistic efforts there in kind of participatory, so-called participatory and community-based work and architecture.
So do you mean like having the models already produced and having certain variations, but not
Yes,
a true
exactly.
ability for the community to actually contribute?
Yeah,
okay, interesting.
Yeah. That's because that shows the power of the model, right? Because there's such great tools for convincing, for kind of making someone do something or approve or agree to something. Which is why students should always make models to convince their tutors, because it always works. I get convinced when someone shows me a model, so just do it. Cardboard.
Not Amazon.
Okay, not Amazon. Okay, guys. So that's what I've got on slides. However, somebody got the hand up, so we might have some questions in the room.
I have one question, because it was about that. It's a bit tangent, it's not related to this, but the word realize got my attention, because when I was thinking of models, now a lot of the things that we make will get actually built. But when I think of architecture, when I think of, let's say, circular Paulina, obviously they were models for mimicking how material works. Let's say they use bags to mimic the walls. Now we use sketch models, this and that. But laser cut, perfect crisp 3D models,
they weren't used back in the days because we didn't have these. Now we communicate what we want to build like to the highest extent because we can do that. But after that, when it doesn't get built, I feel like architecture now becomes like also what does not get built. Because like in this exhibition, a lot of the things that I saw are not real buildings, they're representations of ideas. So do you guys think model making is now like separate from architecture as it's like on purpose, or does it still, like, is it a tool only to serve like architecture?
It's both and,
Yeah.
I think, coining a phrase. I think that's what I've been talking about up until now, is that the time that it takes to build a substantial building is a long time. And actually, I would say maybe 1 out of every 2 projects, maybe even 2 out of every 3 projects never get constructed in practice either. Often projects stall at a certain time, even at a conceptual level. So models are the thing. The model is the realization of that project at that particular time. That is as far as the project goes. So it's real in that sense. As I say, we're thinking it through a lens of everything. It's a holistic environment where models and drawings and buildings and construction and conceptual ideas are all in a soup together, and it's continuous. There's never really a kind of an end. It doesn't stop, if that makes sense. So the model is realized, if that makes sense, is what I'm trying to say. It's a point in time which captures a thing.
And it embodies knowledge and the process and the ideas that can then lead on to something else, or it can just stay as a model form.
Or influence another project.
Exactly. Yeah. But even if it stays as a model form, I think there's a value in that as well. But it is both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially with competitions, it's highly speculative work. So my last competition, it had 15 participants, of which we were one. Then a second phase as well. The one before that was 20 participants as well. So then failure is quite, failure in terms of the competition is always a big part of is part of the game. But then on the other hand, by producing all these models, you have this sort of repository of knowledge. So in our studio, we always keep all the models around until they basically fall apart, because for sure they can be recycled, they can be reused, and they're still valid. Just because they didn't win doesn't, and for sure you can just use it for the next project and to enhance your enhance your kind of like design repository, I suppose.
Archive of ideas made physical.
Yeah. While also having influence, and not having to construct a building to have influence is another way of thinking about it. That it has absolute value to convince someone about a philosophical position that you may have. You don't have to wait the 10 years. You can do it in 2 hours, sort of thing. So again, just thinking, that thing. Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Has anybody got any others before we... Landa, it's going to be good.
This one is particularly for you. So as you're saying that we're going to have this website where all these models can be stored, and these description makers and the location of the design. But are you going to update the status so you can every, let's say, 5 years to say, well, the structure of this thing failed due to some reason that sort of can reflect on the modeling. So instead it becomes a static thing, it's become an archive, it becomes a dynamic externals.
So it's more of a statement about the practice's ethos. So it's not going to go into like details of every individual project and how like that specific model played a role here or there. That, I mean, the practices can do that if they want in the description of what they submit. But in terms of its stagnation, when practices are part of this, they will be on a kind of mailing list, and each year they will be sent a link to say, if you want to update the content of this page, here's the link, and you can do it within a window of time, so that it doesn't stagnate in that sense. They can, if they change the location or the resource in any way, they can add or take away from that. So it's sort of partly answer what you're saying, but like I think it's not so much about us having this huge collection of models as case studies. This is more about showing you guys where you can go and employ these skills in practice in different places. If that's what you want to do and you like it, we're trying to make it easier for you by showing you, places that are quite outspoken about the fact that they do it, because more often than not it doesn't really get publicized, yet companies invest quite a lot of money in it when they do, or time, and so we're just trying to, having been around this subject for like 15 years plus now, I can see that there are plenty of places out there that do this, but to hear students say, oh no, nobody does that anymore, to me is just like, well, you're not looking hard enough. It's there, and so we're trying to make it easier for people, because clearly there's some barriers to people thinking this is something that they can do, because they can. And to go a little bit back to the previous question, I did a degree in model making to be a professional model maker. So there are careers as a model maker that you can do. And I think there's a question we had from Batista. I don't know if he's actually in the room. He's a model maker. He works as a model maker in a company that isn't directly affiliated with a particular practice. They might do jobs anywhere. So there are skills that you can pick up doing this as an architect and in the model making side of it that are completely applicable to other career paths. And this is a platform that will give you other options. In fact, Pete is kind of an example of that, in that he didn't study model making, but he went on to do a lot of it in practice.
Sorry. No, I think. Yeah, and I think also it's just there's always the potential for it, and it's more about kind of carving out your own path as well. Like, for sure, I could just be doing digital stuff all the time, but then, and for sure I do get some satisfaction out of it, but definitely not as much as with model making. And I think, you just need to kind of be active and kind of have the passion for it. And it's not necessarily a cost thing. You can do it with any resources you have. I think it's just more about the mentality. Okay, we're almost at the end of our time, so I'm just going to say like quick sum up of what we've kind of gone through. So I think the key points that everybody agreed on were that model making is kind of a process of refinement. It's not something that waits to be told when to happen. You should just be kind of doing it as you go along. I think it was Joe said something, listen to the models. I mean, I don't know, I like the idea of you sitting in a room and just saying, kind of putting your ear to the models, see what they say. Listen to them, and what does it say? And obviously that's saying sort of how is it responding to the things that you're proposing as a design, and then how can you learn from that? Digital and physical questions have existed for as long as I've been involved in this, and we're still here. We're still doing it. We're still physical ourselves. We're still real. We're not robots yet. So they work hand in hand. They're like a parallel thing. It's not one or the other. Allow yourself time to do it. Go for it. You have the agency to do this stuff. Don't wait to be told, and ideas will emerge where you can take ownership of it, whether it's built or not. You've then got that embodied knowledge in that you've gone through that process. Whether the building went ahead or the project was finished, you will have learned something from that you never know might end up being a key part of your next project further down the line. But it's that archiving of models and archiving of the knowledge that you've picked up. So don't throw anything away. Well, if you do photograph it before you do, that's a classic thing. If my model's been thrown away and I never got a photo of it, so document your stuff as you go. So once again, thanks to everybody for the support, and everybody on the panel, thank you for your answers today. I
I think that's it. I imagine some beer will be consumed this evening.